Welcome to BrandBusters with your hosts, James Schwinn and Sean Lee. Together, we bust open the latest in CPG, retail media, and life, or whatever the f*** we want. And for today's episode, we got something special cooked up for ya. Extra spicy. Take it away, Sean.
Awesome. Welcome back, everybody, to episode 20 of the BrandBusters. And we have a great guest for you guys today. We've got Nik Hall, who's the CEO and founder of REViVE Marketing Partners. And he's the former co-founder and CEO of the vitamin brand Vita, which was acquired. So we're going to talk a lot about that. Nik built the Vita brand from a D2C and Amazon brand into 20,000 retail doors. I've known Nik for a while. We even looked at potentially acquiring Vita a few years ago. And Nik's very pragmatic, down-to-earth CPG founder. And we're excited to chat with him and learn from everything he learned, kind of growing a brand on Amazon and then ultimately getting it acquired. So super excited to have you here today, Nik. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, and thanks for having us.
So I think one of the questions that we like to ask everybody is, just from your background, it looks like you jumped into building a consumer goods brand that ended up being Vita pretty soon out of undergrad. What made you want to get into the consumer goods space and become a founder? And why did you choose the vitamin space?
Gosh, more than anything, man, I just didn't want to work for someone. I ended up working for a big four. I was far enough ahead in school. I was an average student, and so I was the only one willing to take a semester off. So I ended up getting to work for one of the big four. I don't think I would have been able to otherwise. And I was like, damn, I would do anything to not do this again. So I was like, I'm going to start any business. Before that, I had started a window cleaning business, which was great. People like to talk crap on home services or whatever. And I'm like, they're great businesses. They bring in good cash. It's awesome. Then I started something very similar to like a Favor or Instacart, whatever. Yeah. And it was as basic as it got. I made $154 in revenue, maybe $2 or $3 in gross margin. It was the worst business ever. That stopped really, really quick. And then a buddy of mine and our parents always sent us care packages, and every so often he'd get vitamins, I get vitamins. You'd put them back in the like classic, into this, and you take them for 2.5 weeks, then you stop, right? Just the classic. Yeah, not seeing anything, don't really care. It doesn't, whatever. And we're like, there's got to be an easier, better way. My business partner, Garrett, actually had met an older guy who was a doctor and sold like these little pill packs. And these pill packs had like all your daily vitamins with your name on the back and all this stuff. And we're like, that's so cool. So he went to him and actually was looking for an internship and was like, hey, would you look at doing this, just kind of throwing out ideas. And the guy's like, nope, I'm making good money. I'm good. And so he brought it back to me and he's like, yo, we should try to change it. And so anyways, we started with gummy vitamins and some of that stuff. The business evolved over years, but yeah, started our junior year and then really started the sales. It took us about a year to get funding and, all of our ducks in the line and all of that. So
that's awesome. What was the funding, being kind of that young, getting into it? What was the funding process like, trying to raise for something like that?
Yeah, we raised six figures, raised like I think $600,000 or $800,000 over the total time of the business, which in the CPG world is not a ton. From really just family friends. So we didn't have the typical, we got told by one guy that was like a family friend. He's like, that's the easiest money you'll ever raise. So from the raising money, we were fortunate there, but it was a big process, and it's a big, like, the early days is the biggest risk. You have no sales, you don't have an inventory, any of that. So
that's great.
Yeah, going off of that, I would say Sean and I are both fairly active, have been longtime consumers of a variety of supplements. It seems that a lot of that category is cyclical. Like gummies are very in right now. There's certain applications. Creatine seems to have a lot of staying power, but then you see others where they kind of come and go. Yeah. What trend or kind of primary nutrient solve are you guys trying to introduce with Vita, and then kind of what are some of the ones, like looking at the market now? What do you think is here to stay? What do you think will be gone or irrelevant in a couple of years?
Yeah, I think anything, and I'll just share this from straight data in the company, right? So when we started, we had these custom packs that you could pick your multi-omega DC. I think that stuff will come back at some point, because at the end of the day, like, that's the classics that everyone has always used. But people get so fixated on, like, let's be real, sex sells, which means weight loss sells, making people more money, right? Like, go through the things that like are something that makes someone more attractive or whatever. Yeah. And so weight loss is always going to be. whether it's apple cider vinegar or GLP-1 or Ozempic and gosh, I mean, if some of that stuff actually works without any repercussions, like that's just going to be insane, right? So I think there's always going to be those, but those are going to be trendy, right? Like apple cider vinegar is not what it was because people realized I can't have 2 double doubles, eat 2 gummies and somehow lose weight. It's like, no.
And eat a gummy that probably has like 5 grams of sugar in it.
Right.
And like 3 of them and trying to lose weight.
What the correlation causation, right? Like, hey, this will correlate to a healthy lifestyle, but this will not, guarantee.
Yep. So I think the classics there. I think your stuff like we always found really, really good success in like a melatonin because it's immediate acting and people want the immediate gratification. The slower, like a vitamin D, like good luck, go get your blood work, see if it worked. Yeah. You're not going to feel anything different on a daily basis. I think where people should be really, really cautious is going and hitting like super, like, so we hit ashwagandha really early. This is like right as goalie's getting into it and really hot, boom, dropped off.
Yeah.
And so I think people have to be really, really careful on like super trendy. Creatine gummies, I think, is here to stay. So obviously I've got REViVE marketing partners and then I've got, Vita. I launched a creatine gummy and it was the number one selling creatine gummy. They went out of stock for 4 months. Their cost per click went from $1.50 to $6.
Wow.
I mean, it's not worth the business anymore, truthfully.
Yeah.
And so be really cautious. I honestly tell people to stay a little bit away from like the super trendy and go like tier 2 or tier 3. And that's where you'll make your most money. You're not going to make $4 million a month, but like you can build a really good business off of a number of products that are $100,000 a month.
I think that's a really good point because looking at you're getting in a war of attrition there with Nestle Health Sciences, the Garden of Lives, the Vegas, the Orgains of the world that can just drive up CPCs. It's more of like those channels like Amazon are more of a defense mechanism versus customer acquisition channel. I think really good points there. I'm focusing on kind of staying in the less sexy at the tier 2, tier 3 to kind of make a dent.
And I think from my time at P&G, right, like big companies chase trends. So if they see that goalie's having success with ashwagandha, like whatever vitamin brand the big company owns is going to launch an ashwagandha gummy and they're going to spend a ton of marketing behind it and then it'll fall off and they'll move on to the next thing. So I agree. Chasing trends just never works. And it kind of goes back to the conversation we were having before the podcast began. It's like, what are some of the boring niches or the more boring businesses that you can get into that, will always be reliable, but aren't going to have huge highs and lows like some of these trends. So when you launched Vita, I think the original kind of idea, if I recall from our conversations when we were looking at acquiring Vita, it seems like it was basically like minimal ingredients. I think the original idea was like 5 ingredients and then low sugar gummies, which seemed like the right trend at the right time, which is probably why you guys were able to grow on Amazon and start to get some retail distribution. But what was the logic behind your initial formulation or where you ultimately ended?
Yeah, like so first, and this is just truthful, right? We bought stock product from our supplier, and back in 2016 versus 2024, massive difference, and just everything. I mean, we were acquiring people D2C. Amazon was as easy as it gets. You change your title and you end up ranking higher. Retail, it was like there's only so many suppliers now. You can go just Google search and you go find 40 suppliers that do gummies.
Yeah.
80% of them are total garbage. Sean, you and I both know some that are very, very good suppliers, but like takes a long time on the lead time. We definitely transitioned our product throughout the years though, from like the stock product. I mean, we were one of the only products on Target shelves that was a straight stock product.
That's awesome.
But what we learned over time was if you have a stock product and someone else has a stock product, people are smart enough to understand that like, there is no difference. So I'll pay for the cheaper one. There was at one time 4 of the exact same products in Target shelves, an elderberry product. Exact same. All different price points.
Yeah, all from the same contract manufacturer.
Totally. And so like what we kind of learned over time is like just kind of figure out what do people actually want. And I mean, I think Jeff Bezos said it really, really well, really simple, but he's like, we're always trying to go after things that people want. People are always going to want faster shipping and cheaper prices. And I'm like, boom. I mean, it's not hard. It's like, that's Walmart's way and that's, whatever. And it's like, I think that's why we see struggles with some of these other retailers like the Foxtrots of the world. And we'll see how Erewhon continues to do. But I think bragging about expensive prices only lasts so long.
Yeah.
So I want to dive into that a little bit more. I think whether you're talking about an arrays or funding and brand, everyone talks about total addressable market. I think if you go a layer deeper, you have your serviceable addressable market, and then you have your ideal customer profile. So I think in the world of supplements, we're talking about like price, but this is where maybe brand comes into play, and also maybe product efficacy, especially for like your core users or that like ICP. I think maybe consumers are more willing to pay that premium. So what is the role that you think brand plays, or even like thinking about the efficacy element and positioning that with customer acquisition?
So ask the question a little bit different. So
I think, did you see, it probably depends on the type of consumer, but did you see price being the number one motivating factor? Was it the brand? Was it the kind of claim or efficacy of the product itself?
I see. So I believe value is the most important thing. And so like where price was not the number one, again, 2016 to, whatever, we've had a fairly strong economy since.
Yeah.
And, you're seeing like right now is a little bit of a funky time, but it's also election season, right? Like everyone gets a little bit funky during this time, but like, price was a factor for sure. Quality was absolutely. We always said like you got to hit the 5 senses. So first, sight. How does the packaging look from an outside? How does it look as like a product itself? Does it look super sticky? Does it look nasty? Does it have an ugly color? Then smell whenever you open it up. Does it smell like does the fish oil smell like fish? Because that's awful. And like you just go through all the senses, right? Like obviously taste is like one of the number one things. And so what we learned before getting into retail was lifetime value. And so for us, we were like, we have got to figure out like we're okay with losing a little bit of margin if we can gain customers at a cheaper cost per acquisition with a longer lifetime value. And so, I mean, I genuinely believe that like everything has to, like you've got to be at a bare minimum a little bit better than the competition. And I always just say like, why not try to hit it a little bit better with everything from your taste, from how it looks, from how it feels to, if you can beat on price is a factor. I don't like price being my value.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And it seems like from your standpoint too, like hitting on some of the mega trends to like limited ingredients and low sugar are also, people are willing to pay more for that. If you pick up a gummy that has like 20 unknown ingredients in it, or like really, really cheap like inputs for the vitamins, like people are willing to pay for something that's maybe a little bit more limited, less fillers, and higher quality actual source vitamins. I know at least myself as a consumer, I do that. I'm not the typical. I probably am more the pill pack guy where I take like 6 or 7 different things in the morning, but I like source each one very methodically based on the type of ingredient, where it's coming from, and how it works together in combination.
And I think where like some go wrong, and this is from me now, like seeing a number of brands from behind the scenes, right? Like you get to see them from a 3PL perspective and an Amazon, like both, like we all have gotten to see so many different brands at this point and kind of uncover a little bit. I think everyone's trying to be like hitting the trend that's hitting. And it's like Lay's potato chips still sells a shit ton of product.
Yeah.
And they've got margin at this point, but I'm like, I mean, just typical business, right? Like we were talking about it before this even. And it's like, it doesn't have to be overly sexy. Like people love the taste of Lay's. And whenever someone looks at wild chips, some people are like, oh, well, it doesn't taste as good as a Lay's. And it's like, well, what the hell were you expecting? It's a protein chip. I mean, it's still really good for what it is. I think one thing, I'm going to just say something super controversial just to irritate people. But I think following the trends of like seed oil is the opposite thing to do. It's a short lasted, like, I mean, we all saw this trend, right? If you go to Expo West, we saw this 2-3 years ago. And I remember calling it out to all my friends that were like in this like super like, oh, I'm so healthy, whatever. And I'm like, no, like they're all doing the avocado oil because that was a big trend and this oil. And now that's like the devil. And it's like, oh, you do that? Good luck. Just freaking go buy your casket now because you're dead soon. And I'm like, okay, shit, come on. Like, just be reasonable with it. It'll be gone in a couple of years and we'll have another thing. That's the devil.
Yeah.
And so
I mean, it's been like that way forever, right? It's like, it seems like it's usually a marketing ploy that plays on some sort of consumer psychology, but I mean, they just happen. The cycles just happen much faster because of, Twitter, the internet, TikTok,
Yeah.
everything else, they can kind of explode. But like, it's the exact same thing, right? Like, for how long was, red meat and butter and beef tallow and all this stuff demonized in favor of like margarine? When you look back at it, you're like, wait a minute, like, why is this thing that has like 50 fake ingredients like more healthy than butter that comes from a cow? But like, for years, like, that was the common belief. Now people are coming around to different ways of thinking, but now it seems like every couple years, because things spread like wildfire on Twitter and TikTok, it's whatever the next trend is, and then that thing gets demonized in favor of the next thing that goes viral.
It's so true.
I think Will Nitz from IQ Bar, James, when we had him on, had a really good point about this called trend hopping, where he was like, I don't want to tie myself to any one trend, but I want to build a chassis for my product that could hop multiple trends. So for him, he was able to ride keto. He uses a lot of like vegetarian protein. So he's like, when keto kind of fades, I can be like more, plant-based protein and like low sugar, like things like that. He's like, so I've got like 6 or 7 different ways in. I don't really care what the trend of the moment is, but I can dial up or dial down one based on wherever those trend cycles are going, because I've got a good chassis that kind of plays on where everything's heading.
He's a smart guy. Like, I've talked to so many CPG people, and there's a lot of them that are like, they're pretty good, whatever. But I'm like, Will is like a top.
No, he's so smart.
Like, I'm like, dude, you think through things just different. I'm like,
and he
smart.
loves to learn. He loves to learn. He'll just call me up randomly and just ask me questions about like warehousing or like stuff that like, I'm like, why are you even thinking about this? But it's how he learns, and he just bangs.
He's a smart guy. It's impressive what he's built.
Yeah.
So I want to revisit, we talked about Lay's, and as we're based in Cincinnati here, Kroger is kind of our big grocer of choice in town. And to your point on jumping on trends, I'm noticing a Messi chip, like Lionel Messi, and then also Mike's Hot Honey chips. So, which I love Mike's Hot Honey. Shout out to them. I put it on my eggs, pizza, everything.
Nice.
But how do you think about this notion of nuisance revenue? So you probably had your core products with Vita 5, but you also wanted to maybe test other products to see like, hey, can we drive some revenue and growth there? Like, what examples do you have with your from your time at Vita 5?
Yeah, like the first 6 months of Vita 5 was awful. Could not figure out how to acquire customers at all. After that, we started to figured out conversion on our website and all this other stuff. When I figured out Amazon, we scaled Amazon. Gosh, we had 450% growth in 3 months after working for 2 years with all these different agencies that were garbage. And so I started getting a bigger head, and I'm like, oh, like, because there was a time and place, and I was a little bit past it with some of it, but that you could literally change your keyword in your title and you become top 10. Right? Like, it was so easy. It literally was just marketing hacking. It was not about good products. Now I actually believe it's more about good products than it is marketing, but you got to have both together. And
I would argue it's about good products, and then just pay per click. Like, Amazon is monetized more, and they've deprioritized the organic hacks that you used to be able to do.
Yeah. Well, so like during that time, I went out there and I just found all these trends, or sorry, I shouldn't say trends. They were more like what I believed to be the next product would be. And so we launched a new thing, not even with it. It wasn't even called Vita 5. It was called like Pace with 2 P's. I don't know. I think we were going a little bit crazy, and we were seeing all this growth with these current products. Like, I launched my collagen, and I ended up growing 20x within like 45 days. And I'm like, okay, so I figured out the formula of doing it. Well, what I forgot when I was launching these new products, I'll give a perfect example, was an L-tyrosine. This is L-tyrosine when there was 4 L-tyrosines on the market. Mine had 500 milligrams, 120 capsules, $18. Okay. Competition had 1,000 milligrams, so double the dose, 180 capsules, so 50% more, and $12. I mean, they were better in every sense, right? But I thought I could marketing hack it. And what it ended up doing was it ended up just costing me a ton of money. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, I've got good margin. I've got da. And it's like, yeah, but you don't have a good product. And so that's one of the things that I kind of found through it. I mean, I think some of those are very smart. I don't know much about like Messi's brand or whatever. You see all these influencers nowadays. I just don't think an influencer is what like builds a brand unless it's like really good. I mean, Max Clemens has been a friend of mine for a number of years, who is Alani Nu, Prime Hydration, the founder behind all that. He's got a lot of brands that he's done that have not done well. Now, the ones that he's had to do well, it's insane. But I mean, I was talking to a buddy the other day, and it's like some of these creators, it's like, I mean, they just end up in lawsuits at the end of it because they're like, well, I thought you were going to post more about this. And I'm like, no, I just had one post. I got all the equity. It's like, well.
You're like, thanks, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that just from our time, like looking at acquiring stuff. I've seen brands that have some big name attached to them that you wouldn't even realize the big name was attached to them because early on they did some deal, gave them like 15 or 20% equity. They posted about it a few times, and then they've been absentee for 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
But you're like, now they still get 20% of all the.
Yeah, they're still big cap table.
Yeah, pretty wild.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, speaking of Amazon, and obviously you're running kind of a marketing Amazon agency now, but yeah, tell us some more about like how you think about finding the right niche on Amazon or the right keywords to grow your brand, and maybe how that has evolved from when you were able to grow VitaFive, 450% over 3 months to what you see now in the Amazon market.
I'm gonna actually take it a little bit of a different step because I think everyone's looking to like they're trying to get the right keywords. And I think what people have to do is they have to look at their portfolio and see like what's going to win. So let's just take like VitaFive, for example. You got a multi-omega, a C, a melatonin, whatever, like all these different products. And it's like, people are like, oh, we'll just figure out keywords, which is like, it's 100% true. You got to figure out the keywords and you got to figure out like the bidding strategies and how do you actually scale it and all this stuff. But like, I genuinely believe if you're in the wrong category or the wrong product, it's going to be incredibly difficult. And so like my first thing is like, try to find something that's like not overly competitive. Again, like we talked about, not too trendy, because when it gets too trendy, you get too many people that go out there and do it. And so like for me, I'm like, look at your catalog. And I had a buddy of mine, he does like 40 million on Amazon right now a year. And his is so simple. He goes in and he does cacao powder and almonds and all these things. And his is more of a commodity. And he goes in and he's like, hey, this one has 3 competitors. I'll take up 2 spots because I'll launch a 1-pack and a 2-pack. I'll be at a really good price. I'll get it out there or whatever. And so like for me, that's one of the things. And I'll release a video here at some point, kind of going through a couple of companies, like what product would I choose? But I would actually go out there, and of course, most people know Helium 10. It's just a simple one. There's a number of other really good ones, but I would just go out there and see, like, go in your your product catalog and see like which ones are tough. Because for me, if I go try to relaunch our apple cider vinegar, good luck. I mean, apple cider vinegar has now become a commodity, and you don't want to fight against commodities that are the exact same products that have 30,000 4.7 star reviews. Like I like going after. I always say, is there enough market size to be competitive? What does the competition look like? And when you look at the competition, what are their ratings and reviews? The worse they are, the better. Now make yours better than that. If all the competition is a 4.8 star, that probably means there's not a whole lot of improvement to be made. Yeah. And then, make a couple slight improvements that are genuine and real. Go look at the reviews of these and figure out, what do they not do well? Is it the taste of it? Is it the packaging? Is it, too much sugar? Is it, figure out all those things. Kind of like you were saying with Will with IQ Bar. Like, sure, hit some micro trends where like you can get a couple different customer profiles together. And then the last thing that you have to look at is, what are the cost per clicks? And I have this simple ACoS formula that I look at, and just a profitability. And it's so simple, but what it is for people is, your price of your product is $10. Your cost per click is $2. You will never make money. Yeah. Okay? Because the 20% conversion rate, you still get 100% ACoS or a 1x ROAS. Like, you got to be better than that. Now, that exact same scenario, you get a 20% conversion rate and it's a 30-cent cost per click. Let's go. Like, that's how you grow. So I think that's a new factor that I've kind of continually taken in that is super, super important.
I think that's huge. I mean, I've learned that lesson the hard way. We acquired a brand called Sapodilla. There was a small brand, and it was a pretty reasonable deal that we acquired it for. But our hypothesis was, hey, we could massively grow this on Amazon. It's kind of in this niche in, hand soap, laundry, whatever. It was more like scent-based, organic. But the CPCs are just what inhibited our growth, right? Because in those categories, you're competing with, a Tide or any of those brands that are just indiscriminately bidding. Like, they're bidding on keywords that don't even make sense for their brand, just driving up because they've got, $20 million to spend on their Amazon CPCs. So just even being competitive on terms that you should, in theory, have a right to win on, if you're in the wrong category, can make it damn near impossible, especially if for like something like that, where it's lower margin than beauty care and it's higher FBA fees because it's heavier to ship. I mean, it can sink you pretty quickly.
I think if people would just look at the profit loss right away, get with like someone that understands it really well, and just be like, hey, would you do this? Because every agency is going to tell you like, oh, it's amazing. We can build you to $100 million a month, whatever BS. And it's like, man, you got to be real with it. And I don't know. I don't think it's as complex as people make it, but
no.
Yeah. When Sean and I were an agency together, I remember doing like the kind of unit economics analysis and kind of breaking down. And I think like 2020, 2021, $10 to $15 ASP worked out on being FBA or a 3P seller. Now, probably want to be north of 20, knowing that Amazon's fees have gone up. Your ACOS just to keep the lights on, if you're in a semi-competitive category, is probably 20% plus. If you want to grow, probably needs to be 30, if not more. Again, broad brush strokes here. But again, netting all that out, looking at what the landed cost is and what meat is left on the bone. It's like, do you want to pad your P&L or do you want to, invest that back in? And I think seeing a lot more SKU rationalization now also. So like, which products are you going to bet on? And are you going to just throw your whole catalog and assortment up there and let your long tail erode your budget and spend? So glad you brought that up, because I think that's something that, while 4 years isn't a long time, a big shift in terms of what it takes to win on Amazon, from an investment standpoint, a merchandising standpoint, if you want to be around and continue to grow.
I think the other... Go ahead, Nick.
No, I was going to go a little bit off topic, so I'll let you go.
Yeah, no, I was just going to tie that back to like, is you're thinking about like what you spend money on and all that and how you grow it. It's a comment you made earlier, James, around like, a portion of your catalog probably driving the bulk of your sales and then having the fringe. Like, having the past few years looked at a ton of brands that we were looking at acquiring, and Nick's obviously being one of them. If I were to look at everyone's sales, and I would always have them send me like their sales by UPC or by product, without fail, the 80-20 rule always holds true. It's like 20% of the products or 20% of the mix will drive 80% of the revenue, and the rest is just a distraction, and usually like long tail, ties up cash and inventory and is expensive to sell and market and doesn't really move. So I think too, like, if you're going to be an Amazon and D2C brand, it's so easy to get into SKU proliferation. That doesn't really make a ton of sense, because then you have minimum order quantities with your contract manufacturer. And all of a sudden, all this inventory is sitting on your books that could be more productively used just growing your core offering.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because it literally is exactly like where I was kind of going with this. Is like, people have got to be careful when they're listening to a podcast or, whatever, YouTube video or whatever, and like bring it to like the basics of it. Like in CPG, you have D2C, you have Amazon, and you have retail. And those three are completely different businesses. I mean, like, you guys know it very well, but I'm like, I don't think I understood it. Like, my issue early on in the business was, I was like, direct to consumer. Okay. So direct to consumer, you don't have to have a 2, 3, 4x ROAS, because you have a lifetime value. They'll come back. You'll make money later. You can put them on the email list, blah, 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 all this stuff. Yeah. Amazon, you got to make money. And then you got retail, and like retail, you cannot have one product. You want to brand block 5, 6, 7, 10 products if you can. So like, people will go out there and they're like, well, I'm doing what Ollie Vitamins did. And it's like, Ollie was run by Eric Ryan, who ran Method and Welly and had 50 million that he put into whatever. And it's like, I'm a big person on like, keep profitability at the top thing, which is exactly what you're saying, is like SKU rationalization. And I always use the example to people of like, let's just say you have $100,000. Typical product launches that I look at cost about $15,000 in product, packaging, all that stuff. That's a typical number. So if you launch one product at $15,000, you got $85,000 worth of marketing that you can go put. Let's change this and go a different way, where someone's like, here's you have to have more SKUs, whatever. So they go 5 products. So they've got 5 products, $15,000 each, $75,000 in product. They have $5,000 per product. This isn't including like, buying more inventory for later or anything like that. I mean, it's the quickest way to go to business. It's like, go launch a bunch of SKUs. To me, I'm like, launch 1 or 2, do really well. I've used this example for a number of years and will continue to. I actually just met him, but Sean with Dude Wipes, is the most focused guy ever. And look, he's built like, I don't know, I'm probably disrespectful saying it's a $200 million business. It's probably bigger than that now, but it's like, I was sitting
and
talking
they're laser focused on who they are and what they do and how they serve consumers.
He's such a nice guy. He's sitting there. I'm talking with a guy, and this guy.
I might have to get an intro. We'd love to have him on the podcast if you can ever hook us up with that.
Yeah, I'm not super close to him. I just was like chatting with him, and this other guy was talking, and he was like, "Hey, what's your thoughts on?" And it was like a different product or whatever. And he was so nice about it. He's like, "Yeah, no, that's super nice. Yeah, I know. We're just staying focused, though, man." And I'm like, "Dude, you are the most focused guy. Like, you're so respectful and so focused." But I'm like, if people kept his focus, like, look, the dude doesn't raise that much money.
Yeah,
and he's like, he sees all these distractions all the time, and he's just like, "No, I'm good. I'm good. Keep going." And it's like,
there's a story. When I first started my career, I was like 22. I worked in the Iams pet food business, which P&G owned at the time, and we probably had 180 SKUs, and it was the same rule. Like, I remember we had a big supply disruption. We weren't shipping like 80% of them. And when we came back in stock, I was like, why is our marketing spend on like really niche products? I think we were spending like a ton of TV ads against like food for dogs that are over 12 years old. I was like, how many dogs are over 12 years old? And how many people want to admit their dog is that old and needs a special food?
Good point.
But I'm like, every end cap, everything should be our like top 4 products that are like 85% of our volume. Like, why are we doing that? We switched that the next year, and we went from like a couple years of declining sales to we grew, I think 10 or 15% that year, just by like, hey, let's put all of our advertising and all of our in-store promotion, everything we can against the like 5 or 6 products out of our 180 that drive, 80% of all of our revenue. And like, let's get back to the basics. And I think for anybody that's starting out in consumer goods, like getting distracted by that catalog mix can be a huge problem. And you hear stories like, dude, why it's like staying focused to win is probably one of the most important concepts you can have early on.
It's so hard because it's like when you're not doing well, you get distracted and you're like, oh, well, maybe this will work. And it's like, nope, just stay the path. I love that example. I run a P&L on most companies I work with. And I just see like, because you'll look at ACOS and Amazon or ROAS or whatever. And if people would just break down the P&L by each product and share that to their CMO or their CEO or whoever it is, you'd see really quickly. It's the quickest way to start cutting costs. Is exactly what you did for Iams. It's like, look at the bottom 80%, see how much money's going towards that by product. And you'll see like, oh shoot, my tacos or my MER or whatever for this one product is like 110%.
Yeah.
Whereas like my top ones are like 20%, whatever the number. So
on the topic of operational effectiveness, you're the second or third BrandBusters alum that's been acquired. So not to say that every listener here that's running a brand, that is their aspiration, but I'm sure a lot of them are marching towards pursuing some type of liquidity event or transaction. I mean, talk to us about that process from being courted by various suitors, understanding like who is the right fit, going through due diligence, the LOI process. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
What does that feel like? I think you had some comments that was the most fun you never want to have again to that tune. But let's hear more.
Gosh, it's from all the people that I know that have sold their brands, all different levels of how much money they've made. Almost every one of them, when they sell, if they're being honest, are like, money's fine, whatever, but like, I'm just glad it's done. We have an investor that's worth 2-point-something billion, and another one that individually is worth like 3-point-something billion. And they always give us advice. They were not in the CPG space, and they were like, quit trying to build a business to sell, build a business to be a business. And this is like, 2016, 17, 18, like these are where everyone was getting $50 million valuations and $10 million checks every other week. It's like that. It was like we were living in la la land for a while. Now we're back to reality, and it's like money's tight, interest rates high. Like, it's tough. I think the most important thing is just build a really, really good business because, man, the stress that it comes with. So you go out and you either choose, do you use an investment bank or do you not? Do you go on, depending on size of the company, do you use something like a Flippa or some online business broker or whatever?
Yeah.
And then you get all your documents straight. So people are always like, oh, it's a total pain in the ass selling the company. And I was like, I don't understand what it is. I've got my books super straight. I've got all these documents, whatever, like keep all that stuff super organized, because I did not spend much time on that once I got it done. Everyone asks for the same stuff. They want an inventory report. They want this. They want this. They want this. They want the 50 different reports. And so, I mean, even with like Sean, boom, I'll send it to you in 10 minutes. And
like 3 years of your P&L, your balance sheet, like all that stuff. It's
everyone
like,
wants plus or minus the same. Put it in a big folder, ship it off. Really good. Then you go through the conversations. And then it's super interested. Let's look through it. Okay, cool. Let's go through. Half the people are just looking to see numbers. And I mean, like Sean's a smart guy. Sean's looking for the best deal. And in this market today, people are looking to get wins, like straight up wins. They're like, who's willing to undervalue their business that is in an urgent place to sell? When we were at the time, we were like, we had decent profit and, you know, we were in a good spot or whatever. Anyways, we had like 4 people on the table at the end of the day. And we had some stuff where like some people didn't like an investor and other people didn't like, you know, one small thing. And so it was just this like high stress, super excited, high stress, super excited. And then literally like we've got the deal and our lawyer came in. Our lawyer who we're paying supposed to be on our side, right? And at the end of it, we're working with this current company and they come in. I actually just shared this. I didn't want to share it at the time with the company that was buying us, but they were like, well, since they did that, you want to add $100,000 back in? And I lost it. I'm like, we're not doing that. We're not acting like children with this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you doing that is going to make me lose this deal. And we're going to lose a whole lot more than whatever. So like, man, it is like highly stressful. It keeps your eye off of like what's actually important. And so like for anyone that's doing, and then to be completely honest, like once you get acquired, there's a whole nother side of it on the back end.
Yeah.
Like I've worked for a company and gotten fired, laid off, whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter. And I'm like, that day was like the craziest day to me because when I sold Vita, I still to this day have random shit I'm doing. I mean, my email's still like everything's still there. And so it was like this. I mean, this has been a year and a half at this point, and I still get the occasional like, hey, can you help with this? Whatever. Yeah. Well, when I got laid off or fired or whatever you want to call it from the job, I think they technically call it laid off, but I'm like,
you never hear from them again.
But they shut my computer off. And I'm like, shit, are you kidding? This is the best thing ever. I'm like, I wish someone would have shut my other computer off.
I think those are really good. Those are really good points because on the acquiring side too, and for us, like the reason I haven't acquired as much is like the value prop. It's like we're trying to play below private equity, and a lot of companies are kind of tight whether they're profitable or not, and then like their investors and exit expectations versus what we're willing to pay to try to see if we can make money on it. Like those weren't always aligned. So especially when you had like the Thrasios and everybody else of years ago, just making the market insane and out of touch with reality. But I think even on the acquiring side, like having done some deals, you go through it, you're kind of adversarial and you're nitpicking and everyone's trying to get the best price and the best deal. Yeah. And you're kind of at each other's throats with legal and everything else. And then it's like, great, the deal's closed. Now everybody needs to work together. So it's like, you've just spent the past like 3-4 months, like nitpicking everything and kind of being cold and trying to like get a better deal or get money off, like you said. Yeah. And then it's like the deal's closed. Okay, great. Now let's go work on the transition together. Like for me, I always find that to be just very awkward because you have a lot of tense and awkward conversations on both sides during the acquisition process. Yeah. Then it closes and it's like, great, now let's all work together. Like we need you to like onboard us and help us transition everything. And
now let's be best friends. We've been fighting for a while. Now let's become good friends.
It's just a very strange dynamic, just the way that
it is.
The whole process runs.
That's good hearing it from your side on that too, because it's like, no, I'm sure from your side, from the acquiring side, it's stressful too. Yeah, like, geez, I just went through all this work that could be worth nothing. And I've done this 10 times over. Like, gosh, is it
you're getting you're getting legal bills and everything else. So you're like, you want the deal to get done because you don't want to be stuck with like a $25,000-$30,000 legal bill with nothing to show for it.
Oh yeah.
And then from what I understand, it's like the sprint after the marathon where, okay, maybe now there's an earn out period. And so you've been spending all this time. Now you got to lace up for another 12 to 24 or 36 months. Yeah. And then depending on cash for stock deal, there might be capital gains implications. So it's like there's all these complexities. You're like, shit, this feels so great. I'm at the finish line, but you're actually having to hold on for dear life and like keep the engine moving. So,
both sides are trying to win. It's like, it's hard to make it a full win-win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's win and get through, win and endure.
Oh yeah.
I think
what-
one or go ahead, James.
No, you go ahead, Sean. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, one of the things I know about, like, because we obviously looked at VitaFive, is you guys went into retail, and like you talked about, direct to consumer, Amazon, and retail. They're like three completely different business models. Like
Yep.
you really have to manage all of them differently. I know you went pretty hard into retail with Target, some drugs, some other things. For founders out there that think that, like, great, the buyer has accepted me and put me on shelf, like, let's celebrate and pop the champagne. What advice would you give them? Because I think that's when the risk and the work actually starts. Like, what would you do differently, like, with your expansion into retail, and what lessons did you learn kind of going into different retailers with VitaFive, and some things you might have learned the hard way?
Someone said it to us, like, me and my business partner bought a nice watch whenever we got Target. And later he had, these are his words, but I agree with them. He's like, man, I bought the watch before the cash came in. And they're like, no deal is done until cash is in the bank. And you know how a lot of those retail deals are.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in one of the years that we had, we wrote off $500,000 at the end of the year. I'm not saying, I don't even know if it was in total. It was like $500,000 at the end of the year just to clean up the books because they just didn't pay. And it's like, I mean, the fees and stuff, like, you got to be really, really cautious on retail. Like, I will say this. I learned D2C really, really well. I was in the 2016, 17, 18, 19 era of that stuff. It was a lot different then than it is now. I mean, I still think there's potential, but you got to be really, really cautious. Amazon, I still think has a lot of opportunity. I think there's other channels that have really good opportunity. Retail, you got to know how to do retail. Like, whatever one you get into, I would get into one and get into it really deep. I would talk to people that are like experts and understand all of it. I will say this. I was really good at selling into retail. I was not good at getting it off shelves. Now, we still sold pretty well off of shelves, but nobody can tell you how to get it off shelves better, because if someone could, then they'd be the best in the world, right? Like, I mean, that is the hardest thing. How do you go get 4,000 doors and get marketing in each one of them to get someone to, okay, cool. We've all heard the IRCs and the coupons and the shelf placement and like, it's all simple stuff, but like, yeah, I just think it's really tough. I'd be really, really strategic. Drug, stay away from that.
Yeah.
Drug is awful. I don't like drug.
Yeah. Drug can be challenging. And a lot of people get hung up. I think there's always two concepts I tell people, having probably touched the stove and burned myself multiple times, is one, I'm on the board of a company right now and they're going to get some distribution at Walmart. And this is something we're talking about, which is get really clear with the buyer on what their expectations are. Like, how many units per store per week is success? What stores are they putting you in? Are they in the right zip codes? Like, can you like work with them to make sure, the product is kind of where it should be for the consumer who's going to buy it, and get super clear on like, what is he or she actually expecting the units per store per week to be, so that you can try exceed those. And if you can sandbag it, try to sandbag it as much as you can so that you can exceed it. I think that's number one. The second piece is read the fine print too. Like, a lot of people don't realize you have to give a bunch of free cases, a bunch of free products, pay slotting fees. If you don't hit certain velocity rates, you might have to buy back product. And that's where for drug, especially, a lot of channels like that. I see it with like UNFI, the distributor. They're very unfavorable terms that if the product isn't moving, you may have like recognized that revenue, but then you're writing off you're either buying back or writing off a ton of product that's getting destroyed.
That is real as
6 or 7 months later.
Oh, it's so bad. I mean, I still remember, gosh, this like PTSD for me. My gosh, freaking investors coming in. Hey, you made all this money. Where is it? Show me it. Accounts receivable, they're 2 days late. What the hell? They're 103 days late. I'm sitting there, I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, sue them. Oh, yeah, go sue a big retailer. Yeah. That's not going to work.
Sue Walmart. That's going to be helpful.
Yeah, your buyer's kicking me out and they're pretty much flipping me off and telling me to get out the door. It's like, but yeah, no, it's as real as it gets. Retail is really, really tough. If you can figure it out, it's amazing. But it is a challenge.
I think there's a really interesting approach that I've always been an advocate of. Even from my time at P&G, I launched a brand called Zevo out of the Ventures group, which was different than most of big CPG. But it's like, I think you said it best. It's like, pick one retailer and go really deep. Like, do that for exclusive for a year so that you're only focused on one retailer and that you can figure out how to move the product off the shelf at that retailer. I think Harry's Razors did a nice job of that, where they went to Target for a year. Then I think they went to Walmart for like a year or two. So they only had those 2 retailers. Then after that, it was like maybe a Kroger or something, but they didn't go every store right away, because then you're just not going to have the focus or attention to win in any of them. And then you can kind of grow your national awareness of the brand in line with your distribution. Otherwise, people it's the same thing. If you launch 5 products and have no money to spend on marketing, if you go into 5 retailers and have no way to move the product off the shelf or create a focused market plan for those retailers, you're kind of dead in the water.
I don't know how you like say that enough, because I got told that about a dozen times before doing this, and I just kind of ignored. It's like those that are out there that are like, hey, I'm going into retail or whatever, like it's as real as it gets. We were in every single HEB store, let's just call it 250 stores. I went down to one that was in a low income area. Again, ours was a semi-premium product, and I think it was $12.99 is what we were selling it for. They were $2.99 and could not sell.
That's insane.
And I went down there and I'm like, that's cheaper than my cost of goods. Like, I need to go down there and just go buy them all back. Now I had to pay the cost on all of them.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we went down to 150 stores strategically, because at first we're like, no, we want all stores. That's the only way we're going in. We were like super in our head, whatever. We sold the exact same amount. I mean, literally, like there was 0 sold at those other stores. And so our numbers actually looked substantially better, because we'd sell, X number of units per store per week, versus before it was like substantially lower, because we had 100 stores that were selling nothing. And so I actually think like the less stores, the better, even though people think more better.
Agree.
Now, you're either very motivated to transition topics or a glutton for punishment, because post-acquisition of VitaFive, you've actually started not 1, but I believe 2 new ventures since those days, with Leaf Home and then your agency, REViVE. Sean and I, ex-agency, I work for an ad tech provider that works with a lot of agencies. Want to kind of give you the floor for a minute to kind of like, hey, you worked with a bunch of agencies during your time at VitaFive. I think I watched a recent video of you kind of promoting like the launch of REViVE. You worked with like 5, 6, 7 of them, couldn't get it figured out. You rolled up your sleeves. You were able to kind of growth hack it. Now you're kind of doing this. So how do you feel like REViVE is kind of differentiated? What do you guys bring to the table, and kind of what type of clients, are your sweet spot?
Yeah. I started it truly out of like, I'm so sick of all these people, but don't get me wrong. Like, everyone's got to look at a business and make sure that it makes sense. And it fits all of the things. A lot of people want to get into entrepreneurship because they want to, they want to take unlimited vacation. They want to go hang out. And that's just the reality. Right. And like, I have to keep myself like very grounded. Like, I sit in this office, like as much as I can, but I was having conversations earlier of like, there's always more discipline that needs to be done. I started it, and like, it was just crazy to me, because whenever I first started it was like, let me just see if I can actually do this. Because by the end of VitaFive, in the early days of VitaFive, I was like, oh, we can do anything. To the end, it was like every time we launched a campaign, I'm like, yeah, we'll see how that does. I mean, I was just like negative about everything, because I'm like, it never was as good as we thought. And then Amazon was one of the first things that I was like, whoa, I just saw success like right away. But you also have to understand, I was in that game for 8 years, understanding anything and everything. And what I found is, and go look at this, like for those that are looking for an agency, I'm the softest sell with a lot of this stuff. Like, I limit the amount of brands that I work with, because I talked to a number of agencies. I talked to Sean. I talked with, I think it was 17 other agency owners, and tried to figure out. And what a lot of them told me is, once you hit a certain size, quality goes down. Don't worry. Like, literally, this is like words. Quality goes down. Don't worry about it. That's how you start making your profit. And that's right. And I'm like, holy shit. Well, then go look at their background. Some of these, like, either there's some that like the owners are like pretty good and like have some really good experience and stuff like that. But there's a lot of them where, look at their background. They were like, they worked at, nothing against it, but Discount Tire or some, role. And they found a YouTube video, figured out how to sell. And they're like, yeah, I know how to do all this stuff. And so they've got all this marketing language. So for me, I'm in this space where I'm going to sell it the exact same way that someone else will, right? My goal is to grow your sales, drop your ACOS, increase your ROAS. Like, that is how it is. I mean, truthfully, for me, I have not had a single brand that I've worked with that I have not grown substantially. Not 10%, 20%. Like, we're talking substantial growth numbers. But I'm super selective, because I can't have somebody go mess up my, like, the pride of my numbers because of it. And like we talked about, if someone comes to me today, so for example, I've got an electrolyte brand that I work with. Brought them from 10 grand to 350 grand. We're continuing to grow with it. a month. And someone else came to me in an electrolyte space and they're like, well, could you do that with me? And I'm like, not really. We hit the right time, the right place. They've got the right product. It's the right like kind of switch on it. And nothing against the other one, but at $6 a click, it's incredibly difficult to win on.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my take is like, I don't really care to grow this at, I don't want this to be a 10, 20, $30 million business. I mean, would I like the money on the back end? Maybe, I guess. I don't know. But like, I just want to build this to like a really good size. It's a good business that like I can be involved enough or as little as I want. And I can just grow really good brands. And I don't have to worry about the stress. Cause I know with Vita 5, like you hit a certain point, and this is just typical. When we hit about like whatever, when you hit like the $2 to $3 million mark on D2C, you have to go raise a ton more money. So go look at all of them: Casper, Purple, Ritual, Care of, and then the math stops working and it just becomes really stressful. So for me, I'm like, I just like a really low stress. I worked for Leaf Home, but started businesses within. So I started a garage flooring business, built that to $12 million run rate within about 8 months. And that was super fun. It was within corporate or whatever. Totally different style. Home improvement's really interesting too, though. Totally different sector though.
No, well,
that's great.
I love how you kind of pivoted your, again, starting something, recognizing kind of a need and opportunity, starting that, finding another kind of interesting. I think we think of innovation has to be this like blue flame, like bleeding edge thing. Sometimes it's the not so sexy stuff. I mean, I think that's the one that like undercurrents of this whole conversation is innovation can happen in plain sight, the stuff that's getting neglected and where players aren't allocating the funds and the resources in making the kind of ignorable, unignorable and attractive in some ways. So I think you've done that in your, multiple ventures now. So congrats. And I really enjoyed the conversation. I know, Sean, I don't know if there's anything else you want to poke or prod on, but
no, I think it's great. This is incredibly helpful. Thanks for the combo, Nick. I think the audience will learn a ton. I'll end it like I always do, which is go give Nick a follow or connect request on LinkedIn, follow him on Twitter. Go check out his company. Do the same for us. James and I don't monetize this right now. So the best thing that you can do to help us out is share this podcast if you found it helpful with a friend, a family member, a colleague, and then go to Spotify, go to YouTube and click follow. It just helps us with our data as we're getting this thing up and going. But we try to have meaningful conversations that are with founders that we personally learn from, which is why we do this. And hopefully everybody that's listening can also learn from them too. So thanks for your time, Nick, and appreciate you being here.
Thanks, guys. Awesome being here.